Okay, so if you haven't heard about this book, let me paint a word picture to describe this book to you. Southern slavery, steamboats, vampires, and all written by George R.R. Martin.
Yep. A whole pile of weirdness, all orchestrated by the man who brought you the Red Wedding. Bad luck with his shipping company puts Abner in the path of the mysterious Joshua York, a rich man and an obvious vampire.
Abner is in serious need of a ship, and York agrees to fund the building of the most beautiful steamboat on the Mississippi River. The catch is that Abner has to follow all of York's requests and not ask any questions.
Abner is hesitant to agree, but the lure of a new steamboat called the Fevre dream is too much for him, and he agrees to York's request.
Despite York's love of strange things like poetry and the odd hours he keeps, Abner can't help but like York, and they share the dream of making the Fevre dream the most famous boat on the river.
York brings his odd friends with him and they start down the river, with York requesting to make weird stops that eventually sets Abner to thinking.
Eventually, York reveals that he is indeed a vampire, and he's trying to unite his kind because he has become a vegetarian.
York has managed to come up with a concoction that allows vampires to abstain from what they call the thirst.
Or what I'm gonna call their time of the month. You know, the time when they go out and roam the streets, lusting for the blood of the most beautiful and alive people they can find.
York's concoction means that he no longer has to abstain himself on blood, and he doesn't have to go through the thirst anymore. It means that the people of the night can better integrate with humans, and just maybe their kind will survive.
You see, Martin's vampires are born and not made. New vampires come around very rarely, as female vampires rarely go into heat. They live forever unless killed, and it's only when they reach adulthood does the thirst hit them. Religious symbols don't bother them and they show up in mirrors, but vampires will die if they're left in the sun too long, and they have immense strength and hypnotic powers.
Vampires also adhere to what they call blood masters. The alpha is able to bind other vampires to themselves by drinking their blood, and after vampires are bound to their blood master, they cannot go against their orders.
The conflict of this novel comes from York's quest to seek out the rest of his kind and present them with his concoction. Obviously, not all vampires are excited about stopping eating people, and the most formidable of all is Damon Julian, an ancient vampire who even Joshua York cannot best.
Damon, as well as his human protector and vampire wannabe friend, Sour Billy, wreak all kinds of havoc on the Fevre dream, meaning Abner and York have to work together to figure out how to beat the old vamp.
Set in the slave South, vampirism and consuming human lives is an obvious metaphor for slavery and the refusal to give it up.
Several times the comparison has been made between eating humans and white people enslaving black people, being treated as cattle to satiate hunger. It's a metaphor that works most of the time.
But what kind of sucks about this book is there isn't a lot of diversity in it. There are the vampires who are vampires, and they're their two main human characters, Sour Billy and Abner, and they're both white men.
There could have been a lot more depth added to the metaphor if you got a black perspective. It would have definitely drawn out the elements of race and racism in a way that wasn't present.
Also, the female presence in Fevre Dream was fairly poor. We only get one female character who actually does anything, which is pretty tragic, and from a man who created amazing female characters like Brienne, Arya, and Daenerys, I expected more.
But for the characters we do get, they are interesting. We can't help love loyal, methodical Abner. He's so practical, but also such a dreamer that he's endearing. All he wants is to race his steamboat and have his boat be the most famous one on the river, and these damn vampires keep getting in the way and ruining his boat.
Joshua York is actually the less interesting of the two. When you finally get his backstory, you're pretty happy with it, but it's not anything spectacular or new. He's your average vampire in any number of books.
Damon Julian is a stereotypical villain, so old he has no humanity left. He's the beast who only exists to consume, aka evil incarnate. Standard and a means to an end.
Sour Billy, though, is creepy as fuck. He works for Damon because he believes that eventually he can become a vampire. He will perform any evil just to achieve the power and make himself feel like a man. And unfortunately, he is pretty cunning. Eventually he resorts to cannibalism because he believes it will turn him into a vampire.
And you're so happy when he gets his.
The plot of Fevre Dream has its ups and downs. There are periods where not a lot happens except the steamboat drama, and then the vampire drama only really comes in at the halfway point. The funny thing is, though, is the steamboat drama is actually a lot more interesting than the vampire drama.
I kinda wish the whole book was just Abner trying to make the Fevre Dream the best boat on the river.
Clearly steamboats were some kind of hobby or interest for Martin, and he found a way to write a novel about it.
Fever Dream was a good novel. Maybe not something that we would read again, but it was something that we are glad we read.
It's somewhat bizarre, but Martin pulls it off well, with elements to the story that you're unlikely to forget, like Abner or steamboats.
While the slavery vampire themes don't always quite connect, it is a smart idea and executed not too badly.
If you're a fan of George R.R. Martin, steamboats, or you're just looking for a vampire book that's a little different, then you might want to give Fever Dream a read.
Thank you so much for watching our review, guys. Don't forget to check out our spoiler review to find out exactly what went down on the Fever Dream, and if you like our videos, subscribe. It would really help us out. Bye.